Bright QT. Every student matters.
Hello students. So now let's talk about some of the other causes that led to the French Revolution. Here we are going to talk about the role of the king. Yes students, we all know that in France there was absolute monarchy, right? We do not have constitutional monarchy here. Right now, when we are talking about before the revolution, what happened? So, there was the state of absolute monarchy, as in the monarch or the king had absolute power, supreme authority in simple terms. So here we see that various French kings, they often misused their powers, right? So some of them were quite greedy, some of them were pleasure loving. So therefore, the way that they lived, it required a lot of money. It costed a lot of money, in fact, right? So this extravagant life that they are living in France. So all these things, these are being financed by the king's treasury, right? So we also have learned that when Louis XVI he came to the power, he saw empty treasury there. Now what were the reasons? Again, we have learned a lot of reasons for that. But here specifically we are going to talk about the role of king in this part. Why was there empty treasury in France? Okay. So towards the end of 18th century, France's financial condition had become desperate. Okay. Now here we are talking about again the end of 18th century, that the financial condition where in France it was quite bad, right? Becoming worse. So Louis XV, who was the king from 1715 to 1774. So he emptied the treasury by his poor governance and high standards of living. So like I told you that there were many kings who were pleasure loving, right? He was quite indolent and also he wanted to live by high standards, right? So by his poor governance, remember the keywords here, poor governance and high standards of living. We see that most of the treasury of the king, it emptied during this period. Now, when in 1774, who came to the power? Who ascended the throne here? Louis XVI. So when he ascended the throne, he now saw that there was empty treasury. There was not a single money, but there was a few amount left, right, for the king to administer his territory. So he was also weak and indecisive. Now we are seeing that these French kings, they were quite incompetent, right? They were not able to rule or not worthy to rule, let's say, because they were not able to administer properly. Okay? So we also saw that there were no able ministers. Before this, you have learned this point as well. So here what are we seeing? That all these French kings, they were weak, indecisive, right? They wanted to live by high standards, and all these reasons, it led to this bad financial condition in France. He also tried, who? Louis XVI, tried to raise money by raising the taxes from first and second estate. Let me raise it. So, again, what are we seeing here? Whenever the king is facing problem, financial problem, economic problem here, what is he trying to do? He is trying to raise taxes. Now, this time he wanted to ask from the first and second state. Now, do you think that first and second state, they were willing to pay these taxes? No. And why would they do that? Because they were enjoying privileges, right, of not paying the taxes. So the first and second state, they denied to pay these heavy taxes, and the third state already had their limits to pay the taxes. They were already paying a lot of taxes, and many of them who were not able to pay these taxes at all, right students? So these were the common people. At this time, we see that France was also hit by famines. Famines here is the huge scarcity of food, right? So there was the situation of widespread hunger and unemployment. Now you're seeing the agitation of common people here. Now, because of these reasons, that the king, they wanted to live in by high standards and they wanted to enjoy their life without caring about their subjects, and another king who was quite weak and indecisive, right? So because of these reasons, there was the situation of famine as well, right? Because the price was also rising, because the financial condition is not good, the economy of this place is not good. So therefore, who is going to suffer? The common people is going to suffer, right? So it led to riots in different regions. We can say that role of king here in causing the French Revolution is again very important, because the people here, they wanted to challenge the king, the authority of the king, right? Who was not working according to the will of the common people. Okay? So Louis XVI, now he gave up. Looking at these riots, these agitations, now he decided to give up and he called for a meeting of Estates General. Now when I am telling Estates General, we are talking about the parliament consisting of the three states, that is the first, second and the third estate. Okay? And this Estates General meeting, it hadn't taken place since 1614. So basically, discussing on these issues, the first one here is to raise the taxes. Now, since the king, he was not able to understand what to do, he decided to call up a meeting, the National Assembly here, that we will again learn later on, and it hadn't met since 1640. Okay. Now, talking about the questions here, we have a question, that is, describe the role of Bourbon kings in the French Revolution. Right now we read about this part only. You have to mention about the role of the kings here. Bourbon kings, do not get confused. Why? Because we know that during the French Revolution, which dynasty was ruling? The Bourbon dynasty was ruling. And I also gave you a hint in order to remember the name here. Now your favorite biscuits, like some of the students might like Bourbon biscuit a lot, so they can remember the name very easily here. So describing the role of kings here, what we have to say? That the financial condition in France was quite bad and the kings played a major role. When we are talking about Louis XVI, he wanted to live by high standards and he spent a lot of money and emptied the treasury, right, till 1774. Now after 1774, we have Louis XVI, who came to the power, again who was weak and indecisive, right? Now the financial condition here is again quite grim. So he decided to raise the taxes from the first and second state, and the first and second states, they denied to pay these taxes, and the third state already was paying a lot of taxes. They could not cross the limits of asking these taxes, right? So the role of kings you have to mention here like this. That happened in French Revolution, right? Many riots started taking place, situation of famine, and the king was not able to do anything. Finally, he decided to call up a meeting of Estates General that hadn't met till 1640. So these are the points that you have to keep in mind while writing the answer of that question. The next question here is, discuss the political, economic and social causes of the French Revolution. Now here I am just going to give you some pointers, because we already have discussed in great length all these important factors, right? So the first one here is the political causes. When we are talking about the political causes, it means that talk about how the administration was working here. We are going to talk about the role of kings that played a major role in weakening the administration, the financial condition, right? The financial condition during this period, and king played a major role. right? We have to talk about it, that we have discussed right now, that in 1774 when Louis XVI came to the power, then they participated in American War of Independence, right? How a lot of money was involved in that, and there was a great financial stress during this period. So these are the points that you have to mention here. When we are talking about the economic factor, in economic factor, we have to talk about the system of heavy taxation and how common people were affected by this heavy taxation. Salt tax, tithe, tail, there were a lot of taxes that common people had to pay, and the first and second state, they were exempted from it. Then you will talk about the situation that is of subsistence crisis in economic factor that we have already discussed in great detail. Now, when we are talking about the social causes, we have to talk about the rise of middle class in 18th century, who had wealth and also they were educated. They believed in equality, liberty, freedom, right? They questioned the privileges that were given to these first state by or the second state by birth, right? So they believed that it should be on merit rather than by birth. So role of middle class or rise of middle class in the French Revolution. You have to mention all these points here that we have read in this particular topic here. Okay, so this is how this is going to be a long answer. So you have to prepare your answer like this, talking about the political causes, then the economic causes, and then the social causes. Thank you.